I'm the chair of the Finance Committee of the NOW Joint Power Authority and New York State Canal Corporation. I want to welcome trustees again, our Board of Trustees Chairman, John Kamel, Trustee Nick Andre, Trustee Ann Kress, who's participating via video, and shortly to be joined by Trustee Pacente, who's on his way, will also be joining us by video. This is, as I said, the very first joint meeting of the New York Power Authority Board of Trustees and the New York State Canal Corporation, which was reconstituted on January 1st as a subsidiary of the authority. I note that the members of the authority's Finance Committee were also appointed to serve as in the same function on the Canal Corporation, so are also now the Finance Committee members for the Canal Corporation. I want to welcome Gil, our CEO, as well, and his staff at the New York Power Authority, as well as from the Canal Corporation. This meeting has been duly noticed and as required by the Open Meetings Law, and I now call the meeting to order. Does any of the trustees or members have any amendments to the agenda that's been circulated? I assume it's been reviewed by anyone? Everyone? Then I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as it's been proposed.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No further discussion. The agenda is adopted. The next portion of the meeting will be held in executive session. I asked for a motion to conduct the executive session pursuant to the Public Officers Law of the State of New York, Section 105, to discuss matters leading to the promotion or removal of a particular person. Can I get a motion?
Second.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. We will now move into executive session. I would like to now entertain a motion to resume the meeting in open session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. I'd also like to state that there were no votes taken during our executive session. At this time, we would like to turn to the consent agenda, which consists of routine housekeeping items that's now before the trustees for adoption. Members received all of the material. You've had a chance to review it, as well as the executive summary. Ahead of this meeting, we should be able to go through this public session fairly quickly, I think, in light of the items on the agenda. If I could get a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I would so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. In line with the speediness that I indicate we'd be able to do at this point, I guess we'll turn it over to Bob so that you can go through both the amended 2017 Power Authority budget as well as the Canal Corporation budget, which we'll be reviewing formally for the first time. Bob?
Thank you. If these slides are queued up here properly. No, apparently not. So you have this information in your materials, so I'll just refer to them. The Canal Corporation budget is the exact same budget that you reviewed last meeting in December when the NYPA budget was adopted. It involves about $145 million in total expense, of which about $84 million is operating expenses. That's essentially broken down by about $72 million in recurring operating costs, plus some one-time costs, $6 million or so for what we call secure and stabilize. That is for things like vegetation management, inspections, and some EH&S and emergency management expenses to essentially deal with some of the existing conditions that we found when we took over the canal operations. There are also some implementation costs in O&M that are one-time transition costs, again, as we discussed in December. And then we have about $60 million total of capital costs, of which $11 million are one-time expenses, largely IT costs that NYPA is incurring to integrate canals into NYPA's systems. And there's about $49 million consisting of major repair and replacements of structures, and a large portion of that will be ongoing expenses as we roll out the program of improvements or repairs, I should say, and replacements of structures over time. So again, the total of $145 million is consistent with what you've seen before. So there's one item on the agenda for adoption of that budget, essentially counseled by the Canal Corporation Board. And then the second item is to amend the Power Authority budget. As you know, we have to formally adopt that. The board has to formally adopt that so we can file that with the appropriate authorities, the Controller's Office and so forth. So what we need to do is, now that January 1 is passed and we now legally own the Canal Corporation, we need to amend the Power Authority budget to include the Canal Corporation budget. I should add that in addition to the O&M and capital expenses, legally there's a requirement for us to also adopt the budget for the Canal Development Fund, which, as you recall, is the fund through which the limited amount of revenue that Canal collects flows, and then it essentially gets expensed out for the limited purposes that the state has authorized that Canal Development Fund to be spent, which is largely, marketing and community affairs kinds of expenses. So
I have a question on that. So on the development fund, just to make sure that I understood it, because what we want to avoid is any kind of creep of what goes into that fund. So as I understand, currently it's just revenues from the canal that make up this fund. It's not any an additional contribution that we would be making to support the fund.
Right.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, well, I would assume we would have the option to do so if we wanted to, but there would be no real reason.
Right. I just wouldn't want this to turn into a mechanism through which, we would be providing funding to the state, sort of.
No, I think anything that we could do through the Canal Fund, we could also do through the general budget of the Canal Corporation, so there would be no reason to do that. In fact, there's probably more restrictions on that fund, so we'd like to avoid it when possible.
Right.
And 60 days later, round numbers, at the end of January, so it was the end of November when you wrapped up budgeting for both canals and the Power Authority. 60 days later, you're comfortable that the budgets we've already seen, reviewed, been presented, bottom up, zero-based, whatever, still hang together. Now that you've got a much better handle on how we finish the year,
right.
There's no spillover, carryover there, nothing else that needs to be revisited at board level relative to the budgets you presented in mid-December.
No, we're very confident in the plan that we presented to you. We still feel that's the right plan for 2017, and it's appropriate as written.
Okay. Do we need motion then?
We have motions.
So yeah, I think, so should we do them
Two
separately?
separate
We'll do
motions.
Yeah,
Okay, so we'll first take the Power Authority, but you were finished on anything, nothing additional for the Power Authority budget?
No.
Right, okay. So at this time, I will entertain a motion to adopt the recommendation with regard to the 2017 amended Power. No, first we have to do them separate. The Power Authority budget first.
Amended.
Yes, as
The way the
amended.
judge and I think we'll adopt the canal budget first, and then we'll incorporate that, and that's where we're coming from.
Got it.
Sequence
Okay. All right.
probably doesn't matter, but for lawyers and
So I won't
accountants,
follow my
we
script.
pretend it does.
A motion on the 2017 canal budget.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Oh,
Yeah,
Tony, you
Morning,
joined
Tony.
us. I heard your voice. Great.
Gotta
Well,
zoom in there, Tony. You look like you're
Jason
Bourne in the corner over there. You're making me nervous.
He's green.
Miles away, that's why.
Right. Gotta get you on Zoom.
Exactly.
All right.
Okay, so now that we've done the canal, now we'll turn to the amended 2017 Power Authority budget that incorporates the canal budget. So I'll entertain a motion for that.
So move.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay.
Thank you for acquiescing to two old men over here. I
Okay,
appreciate it.
my pleasure.
Thank
My
you, old man.
pleasure. No problem. And so now we'll turn to Justin. You will go through for us the Canal Corporation bylaws as well as appointment of officers of the corporation. We'll just take those jointly. If
Great.
That makes sense.
Thank you. So as we discussed earlier today, similar action here. The final piece in establishment of the governance framework for the Canal Corporation is the establishment of new bylaws in order to facilitate the Canal Corp's operations as a subsidiary of the corporation, but at the same time maintaining its distinct legal status as a subsidiary of the Power Authority, it's necessary for us to create these additional governance documents. And so to effectuate this, you have before you proposed new bylaws for the Canal Corporation. And the bylaws contain the designation of officers of the Canal Corp too, and it's staff's recommendation that the officers of the Canal Corp be the same as the officers of the Power Authority. We think that creates the most efficiencies and coherence between the parent and subsidiary corporations. Again, like the charters, these bylaws track in all material respects the NYPA bylaws, and this was done for the same reason. It's worth noting that the Thruway Authority, when it took on the Canal Corporation in 1992, followed a very similar pattern and established the officers of the Canal Corporation as the officers of the Thruway Authority. So we're sort of following a familiar pattern here. Excuse me. Some quick highlights of the bylaws. First, the board members of the Power Authority are the same as the board members of the Canal Corporation, as set forth in the enabling legislation. The Canal Corp board has to meet at least quarterly by the legislation, and the majority of board members constitutes a quorum, so the same as the Power Authority. We'll need 4 for a quorum for a Canal Corp board action.
It's inconsistent with what we talked about earlier in the charters.
Charter, same, just
two
similar.
meetings, quarterly meetings.
They have to have at least 2 meetings. Is
They have
what
to
it
have
said.
2. We have to quarterly for the Canal Corp, 2 a year for the committees. So a little bit, they have to meet more often. As I mentioned, the bylaws create, as we did earlier today, the 3 standing committees: Audit, Governance, and Finance. And the Canal Corp committee members are the same as the NYPA members. Also, the Canal Corp board is required under the bylaws to review and adopt an annual budget, a strategic plan, capital plan, and expenditure. And finally, the Canal Corp board of directors has the power to amend, alter, or repeal the bylaws at any meeting going forward. So this item is submitted for your approval.
To clarify for my intellectual curiosity,
Yep.
why we're doing this in Finance Committee versus what we did at Canal Corp Board? Why do we approve charters there and bylaws here? Why do we approve appointments there and officers here? Why wouldn't we do all that under the Canal Corp
It's
board?
coming up in the full Canal Corp board meeting, so it was just, again, an opportunity to vet all Canal Corp matters here at Finance. We were
Okay.
looking to bring all Canal Corp matters to you at Finance first, but this will be coming up again for your actual formal approval at the full board meeting.
Right. Finance is sending it up to the full board.
Correct.
But I thought you had requested it, actually. Okay, so understanding quarterly meetings for the board, which will be joint with the authority, and then committee meetings at least 2 a year that would presumably also be joint with the authority committee meetings, right? Okay.
So moved.
Anything else? Okay. Well, I think, do we need to do them separately? The bylaws as well as
yes.
the officers?
That would be good.
Do you guys care which order? Just
I'll
make
defer
sure.
to the
Okay.
committee chair.
Will you this time?
I will.
This time you'll defer.
I will.
All right. So I'll entertain a motion to recommend the adoption of the bylaws of the Canal Corporation Board.
So
I'll second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. And then the appointment of officers of the Canal Corporation is also before the committee for consideration. I will.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. The 2017 Canal Corporation schedule of meetings is before the board. You've had a chance to review the schedule, which I think is, as I said, is consistent with the meeting schedule for the authority. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the recommendation of the Canal Corporation schedule of board meetings.
So moved.
I'm happy to second that.
Are you sure?
Absolutely.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And so now we'll have John
Canal.
Yeah, Canal, yeah, no. So you're going to do it from there. You will talk to us about the expenditure authorization procedures for the Canal Corporation.
Okay, sure. So we're requesting the board to adopt the expenditure authorization procedures governing the procurements made on behalf of New York State Canal Corporation pursuant to Article 7, Section 5 of the Canal Corp proposed bylaws. We looked at the EAPs that govern the relationship between the canals and the thruway, and we looked to maintain similar levels of authorization that they were used to using. And then we went ahead and developed these EAPs. We routed it for leadership review, and we decided to simplify it so that all the EAPs were basically on one page, so all types of contracts will be handled the same for the Canal Corp, just to keep it as simple as possible, and would also provide additional oversight at those lower levels. So that's what's before you today.
Okay. And just to make sure I understand, I looked at the other page where you had the breakdown of all of the individual approval limits for signing. I'm assuming, I think it was clear, that all of these will still go to the board for approval, even the lower levels. On the page where you have the attachment B, sort of approval for limits of all of the individual employees.
Right.
Do all of those limits, even below the 10 million, all of those, I'm assuming, go to the board for approval?
No, those limits would be their authorization to approve. It's only when we get to the, well, these are for, I'm sorry, for the attachment B, this is for contract signatures. So any of those dollar values that would trigger on the first page would have been approved by the board prior.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thanks. Any other questions on?
I'm happy to make a motion to
I didn't
approve.
ask for a motion yet,
Okay.
so
Well, when you do, I'll be happy to do so.
we'll entertain a motion, yes. Okay.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. The next joint Finance Committee meeting date will be determined at some point in the future. I'll entertain a motion now to close the Finance Committee meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Great. Thanks.